scholars, we're back today with Read Aloud. We're going to read chapter 19 of Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. Remember, scholars, I want you to pause this video to make sure that your paper looks just like mine. You can pause at any moment. So we're going to do something a little bit different, just like we've been doing before. Sometimes we have focus questions, and then other times we have big ideas and text evidence. So apparently today we're going to be doing 3 focus questions. So in your Seesaw Post activity today, you're going to answer the 3 questions. How does Charlotte feel at the beginning of this chapter? Why does Templeton say, "He'll take the knife to you, my boy"? Why does Charlotte feel peaceful and contented? Those are our 3 focus questions, so you can think about those as we read chapter 19 today. Go ahead and open your PDF file and get to chapter 19, which is called The Egg Sack. Next morning, when the first light came into the sky and the sparrows stirred in the trees, when the cows rattled their chains and the rooster crowed and the early automobiles went whispering along the road, Wilbur awoke and looked for Charlotte. He saw her up overhead in a corner near the back of his pen. She was very quiet. Her 8 legs were spread wide. She seemed to have shrunk during the night. Next to her, attached to the ceiling, Wilbur saw a curious object. It was sort of like a sack or a cocoon. It was peach-colored and looked though it were made of cotton candy. "Are you awake, Charlotte?" he said softly. "Yes," came the answer. "What is that nifty little thing? Did you make it?" "I did indeed," replied Charlotte in a weak voice. "Is that a plaything?" "Plaything, I should say not. It's my egg sack. My magnum opus." "I don't know what magnum opus means," said Wilbur. "That's Latin," said Charlotte. "It means great work. This egg sack is my great work. I remember in the chapter before, Charlotte did not want to go to the fair with Wilbur because she needed to make her egg sack. But it seems like now, at the fair, she has started to make her egg sack. "The finest thing I ever made." "What's inside it?" asked Wilbur. "Eggs." 514 of them," she replied. 514, said Wilbur. "You're kidding." "No, I'm not. I counted them. I got started counting, so I kept on, and my mind just got occupied." It's a perfectly beautiful egg sack," said Wilbur, feeling happy as though he had constructed it himself. "Yes, it is pretty," said Charlotte, patting the sack with her front 2 legs. "Anyway, I can guarantee that this is strong. It's made out of the toughest material I have. It's also waterproof. The eggs inside will be all warm and dry." And here is Charlotte's egg sack right here that is nice and big with those 514 little baby spiders in it. "Charlotte," said Wilbur dreamily, "are you really going to have 514 children?" "If nothing happens, yes. Of course, they won't show up until next spring." Wilbur noticed that Charlotte's voice sounded sad. You're thinking about those focus questions. "What makes you sound so downhearted? I should think you'd be terribly happy about this." "Oh, don't pay any attention to me," said Charlotte. "I just don't have much pep anymore. I guess I feel sad because I won't ever see my children." "What do you mean you won't ever see your children? Of course you will. And we'll see all of them. It's going to be simply wonderful next spring in the barn cellar with 514 baby spiders running all over the place. And the geese will have a new set of gooselings, and the sheep will have their new lambs." "Maybe," said Charlotte quietly. "However, I have a feeling I'm not going to see the results of last night's efforts. I don't feel good at all. I think I'm languishing, to tell you the truth." Wilbur didn't understand the word languish, and he hated to bother Charlotte by asking her to explain. But he was so worried that he felt he had to ask. "What does languishing mean?" "It means I'm slowing up. I'm feeling my age. I'm not young anymore, Wilbur, but I don't want you to worry about me. Today is your big day. Look at my web. Doesn't it show up well with the dew on it? Charlotte's web never looked more beautiful than it looked this morning. Each strand held dozens of bright drops of early morning dew. The light from the east struck and made it all plain and clear. It was a perfect piece of designing and building. In another hour or two, a steady stream of people would pass by, admiring it and reading it, and looking at Wilbur, and marveling at the miracle. As Wilbur was studying in the web, a pair of whiskers and a sharp face appeared. Slowly, Templeton dragged himself across the pen and threw himself down in a corner. "I'm back," he said in a husky voice. "What a night." The rat was swollen to twice his normal size. His stomach was as big as a jelly jar. I see that the rat had a good time at the fair. He got all of that food that was left over by the humans when they were at the fair. "What a night," he repeated hoarsely. What feasting and caressing. A real gorge. I must have eaten the remains of 30 lunches. Never have I seen such leavings, and everything well ripened and seasoned, the passage of time and the heat of day. Oh, it was rich, my friends, rich." "You ought to be ashamed of yourself," said Charlotte in disgust. "I would serve you right if you had an acute attack of indigestion." "Don't worry about my stomach," snarled Templeton. "I can handle anything. And by the way, I've got some bad news. As I came past that pig next door, the one that calls himself Uncle, I noticed a blue tag on the front of his pen. That means he has won first prize. I guess you licked, Wilbur. You might as well relax. Nobody's going to hang any medal on you. Furthermore, I wouldn't be surprised if Zuckerman changes his mind about you. Wait until he gets hankering for his fresh pork and smoked ham and crisp bacon. He'll take a knife to you, my boy." "Be still, Templeton," said Charlotte. "You're too stuffed and bloated to know what you're saying. Don't pay him any attention, Wilbur." Wilbur tried not to think about what the rat had just said. He decided to change the subject. Templeton said, "Wilbur, if you weren't so dopey, you would have noticed that Charlotte has made an egg sac. She's going to become a mother. For your information, there are 514 eggs in that peachy little sack." "Is this true?" asked the rat, eyeing the sack suspiciously. "Yes, it's true," replied Charlotte. "Congratulations," murmured Templeton. "This has been a night." He closed his eyes, pulled some straw over himself, and dropped into a deep sleep. Wilbur and Charlotte were glad to be rid of him for a while. At 9 o'clock, Mr. Arrowbold's truck rolled into the fairgrounds and came to a stop at Wilbur's pen. Everyone climbed out. "Look," said Fern. "Look at Charlotte's web. Look at what it says." The grown-ups and the children joined hands and stood there, admiring the new sign. "Humble," said Mr. Zuckerman. "Now, isn't that just the word for Wilbur?" Everyone rejoiced to find the miracle of the web had been repeated. Wilbur gazed up lovingly into their faces. He looked very humble and grateful. Fern winked at Charlotte. Lurvy soon got busy. He poured a bucket of warm slops into the trough, while Wilbur ate his breakfast. Lurvy scratched him gently with a smooth stick. "Wait a minute," cried Avery. "Look at this." He has pointed to the blue tag on Uncle's pen. This pig has won first place already." The Zuckermans and the Arable stared at the tag. Mrs. Zuckerman began to cry. Nobody said a word. They just stared at the tag. They stared at Uncle. They stared at the tag again. Lurvy took out an enormous handkerchief and blew his nose very loud. So loud, in fact, that the noise was heard by the stable boys over by the horse barn. "Can I have some money?" said Fern. "I want to go out to Midway." "You stay right where you are," said her mother. Tears came to Fern's eyes. "What's everybody crying about?" said Mr. Zuckerman. "Let's get busy, Edith. Bring the buttermilk." Mrs. Zuckerman wiped her eyes with her handkerchief and went to the truck and came back with a gallon jar of buttermilk. "Bath time," said Zuckerman cheerfully. He and Mrs. Zuckerman and Avery climbed into Wilbur's pen. Avery slowly poured the buttermilk on Wilbur's head and back. And as it trickled down his sides and cheeks, Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman rubbed into his hair and skin. Passerby stopped to watch. Pretty soon, quite a crowd had gathered. Wilbur grew beautifully white and smooth. The morning sun shone through his pink ears. "He isn't as big as the pig next door," remarked the bystander, "but he's cleaner. That's what I like." So do I, said another man. He's humble too, said a woman reading the sign on the web. Everyone who visited the pig pen had a good word to say about Wilbur. Everyone admired the web. And of course, nobody noticed Charlotte. A sudden voice was heard on the loudspeaker. Attention, please, it said. Will Mr. Homer Zuckerman bring his famous pig to the judges' booth in front of the grandstand? A special award will be made there in the next 20 minutes. Everyone is invited to attend. Crate your pig, please, Mr. Zuckerman, and report to the judge's booth promptly. For a moment after this announcement, the Arables and the Zuckermans were unable to speak or move. Then Avery picked up a handful of straw and threw it high in the air and gave a loud yell. The straw fluttered down like confetti into Fern's hair. Mr. Zuckerman hugged Mrs. Zuckerman. Mr. Arable kissed Mrs. Arable. Avery kissed Wilbur. Lurvy shook hands with everybody. Fern hugged her mother. Avery hugged Fern. Mrs. Arable hugged Mrs. Zuckerman. Up overhead, the shadows of the ceiling, Charlotte crouched unseen, her front legs intercircling her egg sac. Her heart was not beating as strongly as usual as she felt very weary and old. But she was sure at last she saved Wilbur's life, and she felt peaceful and contented. We have no time to lose, shouted Mr. Zuckerman. Lurvy, help with the crate. Can I have some money, said Fern. You wait, said Mrs. Arable. You can't see everybody is busy. Put that empty buttermilk jar into the trunk, commanded Mr. Arable. Avery grabbed the jar and rushed to the truck. Does my hair look all right? Asked Mrs. Zuckerman. It looks fine, snapped Mr. Zuckerman, as he and Lurvy set the crate down in front of Wilbur. You didn't even look at my hair, said Mrs. Zuckerman. You're all right, Edith, said Mrs. Arable. Just keep calm. Templeton slept in the straw and heard the commotion and awoke. He didn't know exactly what was going on, but he saw the men showing Wilbur into the crate he had made up his mind to go along. He watched his chance, and when no one was looking, he crept into the crate and buried himself in the straw at the bottom. All ready, boys, cried Mr. Zuckerman. Let's go. He and Mr. Arable and Lurvy and Avery grabbed the crate and boosted it over the side of the pen and up into the truck. Fern jumped aboard and sat on top of the crate. She still had straw in her hair and looked very pretty and excited. Mr. Arable started to the motor. Everyone climbed in and off they drove to the judge's booth in front of the grandstand. As they passed the Ferris wheel, Fern gazed up at it and wished she was in the topmost car with Henry Fussy at her side. And that is the end of chapter 19. So scholars, make sure that you copy these questions down and you use race in your responses. That means you need to restate, answer the question, cite text evidence, and that means with quotation marks. And make sure that you're explaining your answer. And then your questions are, again, how does Charlotte feel at the beginning of this chapter? Why does Templeton say, he'll take the knife to you, my boy? And why does Charlotte feel peaceful and contented at the end of the story? I can't wait to see your work. Don't forget race.